Here. We're all so thrilled that you could make it here tonight. My name is Angelica Volan. For those of you who don't know me, I am the president of Convergent at Berkeley, which is Cal's premier cross-disciplinary product development group on campus.
And hi, everyone. I'm Atharva. I'm currently the head of growth for Product Space, which is Berkeley's first community that's specifically geared towards aspiring product managers. We're extremely excited to be here and co-hosting this event with Convergent. We just hope y'all are as hyped about this as we are.
Yes, Convergent's thrilled to have Product Space here with us today. We're also thrilled to welcome Clement Kao, a product manager at Blend. For those of you who aren't familiar with Blend, it's a Silicon Valley technology company that delivers speed and efficiency to lenders so they can serve the modern borrower and safely navigate the industry's changing rules and regulations. And its digital lending platform is used by Wells Fargo, US Bank, and over 250 other leading financial institutions to acquire more customers, increase productivity, and deepen customer relationships. In addition to working at Blend, Clement also co-founded Product Manager HQ and is the author of a number of product management related books. For today's Q&A, we will be starting off with some preliminary questions developed by Convergent and Product Space executive teams, and then we will provide time for questions from the audience at the end. Without further ado, welcome. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much. I think one of the things that I was telling the team just before we got started is right now at Blend, we're actually trying to launch this totally new business line for one of our largest customers. And so, multi-million-dollar effort, something that we're really excited about. We believe it's going to transform the way that consumers are able to take on personal loans, really moving that from this very outdated, very invasive space into this much more intuitive and friendly kind of conversational way for a consumer to know how much can I actually qualify for when I'm getting a personal loan. So we're actually going to be launching sometime this Saturday, I believe at 4 a.m. Pacific. So we're all going to be all hands on deck, waking up, halfway in the middle of the night just to make sure that everyone's all integrated, things are shipping as they should be shipping, figuring out whether we're going to flip the go, no go switch, all that fun stuff. So it's been kind of a week of many early days, long nights, but very, very much worth it in terms of the amount of consumer value we're going to provide for borrowers, as well as customer value that we're going to be providing for financial institutions, like the partner that we're going to be releasing with. So yeah, very excited.
Fantastic. Again, thank you so much for being here today in the middle of your very hectic schedule. I'm sure you're incredibly excited about the launch. We would love it if you could tell us a little bit more about what led you to the realm of product management in the first place.
Yeah, great question. So it was actually entirely by accident. I straight up did not know that I wanted to be a product manager until I was forced to become one. So the way that it went down, actually, which is pretty funny, is back when I was at UC Berkeley, someone did tell me about product management. And what they said is, oh, well, what you're going to do is you're going to be writing tickets. And these tickets are then going to be sent to engineers, and then they're going to ship them. And that's what you do all day. And I said, that sounds incredibly boring. I have no idea why I would ever want to do this. And so I just kind of put it out of my mind. And I thought, well, I'm not going to do that. While I was at Cal, I actually double majored in MCB and Haas, right? So business and biology. And those majors I took not because they led to any particular career, but just because I liked them. Like I had fun studying them. And I was like, okay, I'm going to major in these. And so when I graduated, it wasn't very clear, what career path should I take? And so I decided to be a management consultant just because that way I could kind of see all the different kinds of problems that really large institutions like Fortune 500 companies get to see every day. And from there, as a management consultant, because I was working in the software space, I somehow accidentally fell into the user research space. So then I became like half a management consultant, half a user researcher. Then from there, I was poached by a real estate brokerage where they wanted me to do user research for them. But then I accidentally became like a product analyst / like internal strategist. So almost back to those management consultant days. And then from there, then I accidentally fell into product management, where basically what happened was, Clement, you helped us find this totally new user segment that we really want to go after. And we're really excited to launch a business around this. Why don't you kind of help us figure out the business strategy, and existing product team, why don't you guys figure out how to build the products we need to go deliver value to this new set of users? Our existing product team said, thanks, but no thanks. We're running a different business right now. We have no time to go after this totally new user segment. And so my executive team had really two choices. They could either try to bring on a new product manager from outside of the company where they might not know who's the user, right? Like what's the business, what's the pain, why, et cetera. Or they could take this like user researcher who was like not paid the way that a product manager is paid, right? And turn him into a product manager. And so they said, great, Clement, you already know the business, you already know the users, you're going to be a product manager. And I fought with my CEO for literally 3 weeks every single day saying, no, you are making the worst mistake of your life. I know not a single thing about how engineers do anything. I don't know a single thing about how design works. I have no clue how like release works and how merge. I know nothing. And I said, well, if that's your concern, what we'll do is we'll have you shadow an engineer for a week. Then we'll have you shadow a designer for a week. And then we'll turn you into an associate product manager. So that's what they did. And I accidentally fell into product management that way. What basically happened was within 6 months as an associate product manager, I had shipped a business that was larger than our existing entire other business. And so from there, I quickly rose the ranks from associate product manager to group product manager there at that real estate brokerage. And then basically from there, I found out about Blend. I thought it was a really exciting place to continue to grow a career and basically hopped on over there. So realized that was a little bit rambly in terms of how I fell into product management, but I think that that's actually very reflective of a lot of my peers' journeys into product management. It wasn't linear, right? I think a lot of folks didn't know they wanted to be PMs or like try to become a PM, but like didn't get to do so. So they like went another way, et cetera, et cetera. So definitely don't feel like, what's it called? Definitely don't feel like it needs to be the very first career that you get right out of college. It definitely can be something that can come in steps. So don't overpressure yourself, right? Like just know that there are so many other product managers like me who have had a lot of outside success, but didn't fall into product management right out the gate.
Fantastic. Thank you. As a student, I find it very relieving to hear that not everyone has an incredibly linear path and you can still end up being super successful. What does a typical day as a product manager look like?
That is a great question. And for everyone who is here, that is a trick question. So the problem is product managers actually don't have typical days because one of the things that's happening is we are always trying to coordinate between all of these different groups, right? Like we're trying to make sure that we are serving our customers, the people who are buying our product to solve a pain. We're always working with engineers and designers to try to unblock them and help them make sure that they know what it is that they ought to be building. And we're always working with our business stakeholders. Is this actually profitable? Are we going to scale? What is our go-to-market strategy? How do we sell? How do we market? All of this stuff. And so a typical day doesn't really exist because every day is so fluid and so different, right? So one of the things that happened, let's say today, right? Like I got up early and then basically, got on all these customer calls, basically to coordinate a launch plan to make sure that, they knew what they were going to be releasing at what time. We knew what we were going to be releasing at our time, right? And then so making sure that we had all of these go live activities together. Then I got a bug coming in from a customer. So then I need to sit down with my QA, make sure that we could reproduce the bug, put it in front of an engineer, see like what was the root cause, figure out like when we want to prioritize actually getting it done. Then I jumped into sprint planning with another team and basically said, okay, well, what are we doing over the next 2 weeks? What's the priority? How do we make all these trade-offs, right? Then jumped back into another conversation with other product managers, basically trying to figure out what is our entire company's 3-year roadmap. And then jump back into a different discussion where we're trying to figure out, okay, well, we found out that there's a different bug with a different set of problems. How are we going to tackle all these things, et cetera? And it's very dynamic, right? It really depends on, what do you want to proactively get done this day, kind of in moving your products and your metrics forward, but also being reactive to a lot of things that are coming inbound, right? Because again, the thing about product management is you're not just a leader, you're a servant leader. And so that means that a lot of people are relying on you to get their work done. Some of the biggest things that you can do is help to align people and kind of pull them all forward in the same direction. And so that means that your day-to-day can be very different depending on who really needs to be realigned or kind of where do you need to learn more information, et cetera. So yeah, there are days where you might work a ton with QA. There are days where you might be a primary salesperson on a call, just trying to figure out like, does this product idea even have legs? You might be spending a bunch of time in strategy. You might be sitting down with engineers trying to figure out infrastructure. You might be working with design, trying to figure out the vision. So there are all these different ways that your day could come to be. And so it's very much on product managers to decide what should my day look like to move all of this forward. I think it is a theme in product management that a lot of it is like you're governing yourself, right? And so it's very much about like deciding what are my responsibilities, what are my priorities and making them happen and keeping yourself accountable for driving all of it.
Your answer was a fantastic segue into our next question, which is, as a product manager, what skills do you find you use the most on a daily basis, and how can aspiring PMs practice these skills? For example, understanding users, creating roadmaps, writing docs and specs, etc.
Yeah, for sure. So I think, one of the things that is really important for a product manager to know is, one of the key skill sets is empathy as a product manager. And what I mean by that is you are very much a servant leader, right? Like you need to find out, what are my customers suffering from? What is the pain that they have? Because if you build something out there that doesn't solve a customer pain, it's not worth anything, right? Like you might think it's really cool, but if your customers don't find it valuable, they won't use it, right? So one, we have to be really, really empathetic to our own customers and really understand, what are their challenges? How do they prioritize those challenges? What are the things that they really care about? But then we also have to be empathetic to engineers and designers and understand, okay, well, what are the challenges that they're struggling through? Where are the places where they need more context about the user, right? Like how can I make sure that I am unblocking them and aligning all of them towards the same shared vision? And I also need to be empathetic to my business, right? Like I need to understand, where are people having challenges in rolling out this product, in selling this product, marketing this product, right? Like, do we have problems with, profit margins? Then does that mean that we have to change the way that we operate, et cetera? But like, it's all about having this really deep empathy for others. And so I think one of the, how do I phrase this? One of the myths about product management is that, a product manager is kind of the person who gets to make all of the decisions and gets to call all the shots. And you only get to do that when you really understand everyone else's needs, right? Because if you're doing stuff in a vacuum, very quickly people will say, nope, like you should not stay here as a product manager because you're not solving for all three of these groups simultaneously: the customer, the engineers and designers, and the business, because that's the only way you deliver a really valuable product. And so empathy is a really core skill. And thankfully, empathy doesn't take all that much more than just genuine curiosity, but just like really wanting to understand what that other person's up to. Why do they want that, right? Just like getting deeper and deeper to try to understand, why do people think that way? It's a lot more about thinking about others over yourself. So it's not, how do I want to move forward in my career progression, or what's the cool stuff that I get to do, but more, what are the things that people are struggling with, right? Like, what are the things that really make their life hard? I want to understand that, because the more I can understand what they're facing, the more I can understand what they're struggling with, the better I can align all of these teams together and find a solution that will solve for everyone's pain, right? So I think empathy is something that is very undervalued when we think about product management. I think another thing that is also undervalued is speed to learning, right? I think one of the really great things is that, most of us here on this call are students. And so all of us are actively learning how to learn, right? Like we're all learning how to keep up with, the pretty intense like Berkeley workload, right? Like we have all been there with the course load. And so one of the really great things is you right now have the perfect time to try to figure out, how could I learn even faster, right? Like you have all these years ahead of you where the only thing you have to focus on every day is learning. And so the faster you can learn, kind of the more quickly you can jump into product management, because the challenge with product management is that there's infinite knowledge that you need to understand, right? And so as an example, when you join a new team, they might be using all of this different software that you've never heard of before. They might be using Figma and Sketch and Envision app to do designs. They might be using Jira, Confluence, and Trello to manage like tickets. They might be using, Dropbox and like Box to like manage like customer communications. They might be using Slack. They might be using Microsoft Teams. They might be using Skype. Like there's all these different things that you would need to know, right? Like for analytics, you might need to know SQL, but you might also need to know all these other things. And so there's so much stuff that you have to learn. And so the faster you can learn how to learn, right? The more that you can focus on, how can I learn really, really quickly, the more you can close gaps, right? I think one of the things that people tend to think about product management is, oh, I need to be kind of this like perfect candidate to be able to move into this like particular role. And that's not really true. What really matters is the challenge with that role is that's always changing, because the product is always changing, right? And so they need someone who doesn't just keep up to an ever-changing role, but actually steps ahead of that role and kind of bends that role to their will. And you can only do that if you're learning faster than what the role's evolution speed is, right? So it's all about, how can I learn really, really quickly and understand, what are the key concepts that matter? What are the key things that really, truly matter for me to learn? How can I learn that as quickly as I can? How can I challenge my assumptions and get through those? And by being able to do so, you can very quickly kind of outrun much more experienced people in the field, right? And so I say this because, and I realize this is going to sound like a humble brag, I promise it's not, but like in terms of product management, right? Like in theory, right? Like if you look at the number of years that I've been a product manager, I've only been a product manager for 4 years, right? So in theory, I'm like maybe a standard product manager, or maybe starting to go towards like senior product manager. But in terms of the kinds of problems that I solve them at like a much higher level. Whereas like there are some in the industry who have been doing product management for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, and they aren't tackling kind of the same scope or size of problem that I'm tackling, because they're not learning as fast as I am, because I've understood that the faster that I can learn, the more responsibility I can take on, and the better I can make other people's lives, right? And so it's really important that we focus on how can we learn very quickly and not be afraid of failing, right? Like using failure as a driver to learn quickly. So I'd say, again, like kind of the two core skills that you want as a aspiring product manager is empathy, and all that requires is just genuine curiosity, and speed to learning, which also just requires genuine curiosity, right? And so kind of all of that leans back on curiosity. And I think that can be a very surprising answer sometimes, because people will tend to think, oh no, but I really need to understand engineering, or I really need to understand like data analytics. And that's not true, because if you know how to learn very quickly, then it doesn't really matter what skills you don't have yet, because you'll get those skills very, very quickly, right? I think I have had times where I've had to stand in front of very, very large, multi-billion-dollar companies, executives, and sell them on a product that they haven't bought yet, right? And it's like, no one taught me how to be a salesman, but I had to learn it. And if I didn't have the speed of learning, I could have never done it, right? And so again, it's not the skill sets that you don't currently have. It's how do you shorten the time to getting to those skill sets that you need, right? So I think like that is, don't worry so much about like, oh, I'm not technical yet. It's more about kind of how can I learn really, really quickly to be able to grab those skill sets I'm going to need later.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Clement. That was incredibly informative, especially for someone like me, and I'm sure hopefully for everyone else. So I'll be taking on some of the other questions from here on out. But I guess one of the major things that we'd also like to learn about a bit is, what are some of the major challenges that product managers really face on a day-to-day or even regular basis, and how can a PM really best equip themselves to like face these challenges?
Yeah, for sure. So I think, so to be genuine and vulnerable, right? Like something that I really struggle with these days is, um, I really struggle with delegating to other people. And what I mean by that is, because I've taken this stance of, I really need to understand other people's pain, and I really need to learn all these skill sets and like do the most that I possibly can. I kind of think of myself as like the infinite resource, right? Where it's like, I can help close all of these gaps and make all of these teams move. But the challenge is that works. So it works decently well when you're a junior PM, right? Where you're learning as quickly as you can, you take on as many responsibilities as you can, and you're growing really, really fast. But the problem is at some point, you're going to start tackling challenges that are organizational. They're gigantic. And there is no world in which you can possibly do all of that yourself, right? Like you cannot possibly set up the design team's roadmap and the engineering team's roadmap and your customer's roadmap and all these different things, because they're the responsibilities of other people, right? And so it's, how do you help people understand kind of what are the things that they need to do and be the most helpful to them getting those things done? Like, how do you hold them accountable and keep them motivated in doing all of that when you don't have authority over them, right? So as an example, right, like, let's say that, you're working on a particular product where you're going to be touching all of these different functionalities, and kind of each of these functionalities is owned by a different designer, right? And these 5 functionalities, they all need to interact together to make your product work. Well, you need to help these designers understand that like you guys are going to need to work together. You need to hit these particular milestones so that we can all like make forward progress. And if you don't intervene on their behalf, if you try to do all the designs yourself, then you're not letting them grow, and you're not kind of using the subject matter experts that you have kind of at your disposal. And also, when you're not trying to like, when you're not keeping them accountable, right? Like it really slows down the initiative. And so I think one of the things that can be very hard is, how can I influence other people to go do the things that I need them to do, even though they have competing priorities, right? And I think one of the really nice things is that because you're currently, in college, you get to practice that skill set a lot, right? Because technically speaking, students don't really have that much formal authority over other students, and students very much don't have authority over their own professors, right? And so kind of you're in a perfect test ground right now to try to motivate or convince or influence other people to go do the things that you really, really need them to do or really, really want them to do, even if they're not particularly eager to do it themselves, right? And so what I would say is the next time, let's say a group of friends are meeting up, right, and trying to figure out like, where are we going to go eat, right? Like surface the decision, right? Like we are going to go eat here, right? Or like, how do we want to run a particular event, right? Like assigning out responsibilities and making sure that people are actually like running towards those deadlines and they're raising their hand when they get stuck so they can unblock them is really important. It's all about how can I empower other people to be independent and to take on their own workload rather than trying to do all of that yourself? And I think that is a very different skill set from what you typically learn in school, because what we typically learn in school is like, we are the sole resource that we get to rely on, right? Like the amount, how well you do on a test depends solely on how well you've studied, right? We don't actually have that many group projects for a lot of our classes where kind of our end output depends almost entirely on other people. But in product management, right, like even though you own all of these metrics, you own all of these products, there's not a single thing that you could do to actually make those things happen on your own, right? Like it is all owned by other people. You can't write the code because engineers are writing the code. You can't do the data analysis because data analytics is doing that. You can't sell the products because there are salespeople doing it. And so, and if you try to be all of them at the same time, you would never be able to get the product to scale. And so I think one of the things, again, is how can you hold other people accountable and influence them? And to be honest, this is something that, even I am still leveling up on and working through, because like this is something that I'm still trying to evolve past. And so I think the only thing that I can say that might be helpful to all of you is, as much as you're focused on growing your own capabilities, which you should, because you are the most reliable resource that you've got, start practicing how can I influence other people to do other things that I need or want them to do, even though I have no authority in doing so, right? There are a lot of casual ways to do this, right? Again, like, hey, do we want to go out on Saturday or Sunday? Hey, whose turn is it to take out the trash, right? Like there's so many different student touch points that you all get to have in terms of influencing each other. Lean into those, right? Like don't be kind of afraid to interact with other people, because that is a lot of the job of product management, is getting people to do the things that they don't want to do, but you need them to do. And that's a very important skill set to have.
I think that's absolutely true, especially to the student part. So thank you so much for that. I guess another question that we all had was, what sort of inspired you? I know you kind of talked about your journey into product. So kind of focusing in on your startup Blend, what kind of inspired you to start working specifically for Blend, and what has the company kind of been working on over the past few months now, that if you could talk about a bit.
Yeah, for sure. So I say this, and I realize this is going to sound a little bit corny, but it's helpful context for everyone to have. So the way that I look at myself and kind of my place in the world is, my personal mission is to make other people's lives happier, easier, better, right? And so it's all about depth of impact times breadth of impact. So how many people have I been able to improve their lives for, and kind of how deep was that improvement, right? And I think, that's how I continue to assess, where do I want to be working? What are the things that I want to be doing? All in pursuit of how can I make other people's lives better, both in terms of depth and in terms of breadth, right? And I think one of the things that was really interesting was back when I was working in real estate as basically this real estate, product manager, one of the things that kept coming up from my end users, real estate agents, was they had all of this pain that I straight up could not solve, right? So basically, when someone is trying to buy a house, right? Basically, the real estate agent is working with a buyer, and they don't necessarily know how much can this buyer afford unless we first know what mortgage they're qualified for. Because basically, if you don't know how much mortgage they qualify for, you have no idea kind of what kind of price range to go shopping for, and you don't want to waste their time. You don't want to waste your time, right? And so my buyer real estate agents kept asking me, Clement, how can I better understand where my buyer is in their mortgage process? And I said, I can't help you. I don't work in mortgage, right? Like there's nothing that I could possibly do to give you that visibility. And interestingly, on the other side of the house, for the people who are trying to sell homes, right? Like listing agents, the people who are like putting houses on the market, we call them listing homes, which is why they're listing agents. They're also really worried about the buyer's mortgage, because what if the buyer puts in an offer, but then the mortgage falls through, where basically the financial institution decides that actually this buyer doesn't qualify for as much as we thought they did, because we've looked into their checking accounts, right? If we looked into their employment history and it doesn't seem to match up, and we can't give them all that much, right? And then that basically makes the deal fall through, where then basically the listing agent has to take the property, they've taken the property off the market because they accepted that offer. And when they have to relist this property on the market, it cuts the home value by 5 to 10%, because everyone thinks, wow, like that home is damaged goods. Like they had to relist this thing. That must have been like so terrible, right? And so here you have both buyer agents and listing agents going, I need to know where the buyer's mortgage is. And I said, I can't help you at all. Like there's nothing I could possibly do to make your life better. And so What's really funny is at that time, one of my really good friends had a really good friend working at Blend. And my friend was telling me, Clement, you need to go check out what Blend is doing because they're doing really cool stuff in mortgages. And if I weren't in real estate, I would have said, mortgages? I don't care about mortgages. Like mortgages are not like that interesting. But because I was working in real estate and because my users had so much pain about the mortgage, I'm like, sign me up. I want to learn more about like, what are they doing about mortgages? Because my agents are really suffering right now. And I thought the really cool thing about Blend was Blend's vision is to make consumer finance better, not just for a borrower or for a financial institution or lender, but for everyone, including real estate agents. So one of the products that Blend has is the ability to give real estate agents real-time updates of where is the buyer in the process of getting a mortgage, which is exactly the thing that my agents needed. And I thought, wow, like if one company can make real estate so much better, and that's like a side output of all of the other stuff they're doing, that's insane. Like that is so much value that they're creating in the world, right? And so I think the thing that really makes me invested in Blend is that, you know, we have this vision that's really evolved over the years, where basically we're trying to make it not just that a borrower has a better mortgage experience, because that's how we started, right? We initially started as basically, we're going to make a borrower's mortgage experience better online. Like that was our core innovation. But we then found out that's not enough. Like we can't just make the borrower's life better. We have to make the loan officer's life better. And we can't just make the loan officer's life better. We have to make a real estate agent's life better. And then we found out, well, mortgages are nice, but a borrower, when they go to a financial institution, they have other needs. They want credit cards, they want auto loans, they want HELOCs. And so we then launched all of these other products into like personal loans and auto loans and all of these things. And we found out, you know, people aren't trying to get loans for getting loans, like they want to move into a house. And so how can we link them to real estate agents? How can we get them through title? How can we get them through homeowners insurance? And so there are all of these business adjacencies that Blend is able to deliver because we've been really focused on how do we solve for pain for everyone in this industry together, right? And I think that that has been really amazing, and it aligns really well with the way that I see my role in the world. So I realized that sounded a little bit like a corporate ad. I apologize for that. I am actually really invested in Blend. But I'm just really excited about being able to deliver so much transformative value to end users, and not just doing that, but also being able to level up my teammates and turning them into better individual contributors, better marketers, better salespeople, better data analysts, better designers, and kind of lift everyone up that way. And then kind of as an aside, from all the things that I've been learning as a product manager, publish all of that and share all of that in these speaker events, et cetera, to help all of you be able to drive that same kind of really broad and deep impact at scale, right? So like that's why I'm really dedicated to writing, to speaking, all of this stuff, because that is how I can kind of drive that deeper impact in the world that I really want to have. So so that's why I'm at Blend. I just think it's really cool what we're doing, and it really aligns well with the way that I think about my place in the world.
That's awesome. And I mean, from your story, it seems like Blend seems to be, you know, the perfect fit for you, like having to solve like a problem that, you know, you experience so much personal pain on. That's awesome. And I guess another question is a little less adjacent to that, but what's the coolest, you know, more of a fun one really. What's the coolest product that you've come across just during the course of your career or even life?
Yeah, for sure. Coolest product. So there's one product that comes to mind, and I would say it was a very accidental product, but I still think it's really cool. So what it is basically in the Blend experience, and I realize this is a cop out that I'm saying a Blend product is a really cool product, but hey, bear with me. On the Blend experience for a borrower, they can work through a loan application, right? And kind of, so there is a borrower side to the portal where they basically work through, okay, how much do I want to take out and what's my income and all of this stuff, right? And on the other side of the portal, you have a loan officer version where like they're able to intake all of this information, right? And one of the things that we did for a hackathon is, hey, wouldn't it be cool if a lender could see what the borrower is up to and maybe help them if they get stuck, right? And so this is something that we call Copilot, where basically, you know, in literally just 24 hours, like 24, not working hours, but like 24, like in real life time hours, right? 3 engineers hacked together this really janky version of being able to see where the borrower is kind of in that process as a lender, being able to see them step by step, and also being able to enter in information on their behalf or like help talk them through, hey, this is what alimony means, or like, hey, like this is what a declaration is, or like, hey, why are you asking me about like Why are you asking me about my ethnicity? And it's like, oh, well, we ask about ethnicity because like this ensures that we don't discriminate and because we aggregate all of these statistics or whatever. And so this co-pilot functionality, which, we hacked together with 3 engineers in 24 hours, right? Wound up turning to this really gigantic selling point for all of these loan officers at all of these financial institutions, right? So we mentioned before, right? Like we have like more than 250 lenders, using Blend. And so it's just really cool to see that there are all of these loan officers who are so much more empowered to jump in and help their borrower. So instead of kind of doing things the old way of like a borrower is stuck, they send in a support ticket, they like call someone like, oh my God, please help me, right? It's like someone can just jump right in there in real time with them, see exactly the same screen that they're on and move them forward from like getting stuck there. That is so cool. And like we did that in like such short time. And it was just kind of this spark of innovation that didn't cost all that much to do, but has wound up becoming like a really powerful value proposition for both the consumer and for that lender employee user, right? And so I thought that that was really, really cool. And it goes to show that, sometimes thinking of the most ridiculous ideas can actually turn into part of your legit roadmap, which is why it's really important to empower everyone around you to come up with ideas, right? I think one of the things that people think is, oh, well, product managers are the ones coming up with ideas and they're the ones making the decisions. It's honestly, we're not, right? Like we should be helping other people seed more ideas, be more creative, surface all of these ideas so that then we have that framework of, okay, well, here are all these really amazing ideas. How do we rank them? How do we tackle them, et cetera? What are the things that will actually unlock value? Rather than kind of being that choke point of, I need to come up with all the ideas and everyone else's ideas don't matter, right? They do matter because having a bunch of brains kind of tackling all these things in very divergent ways can yield a solution that like people have never thought about, right? Like it was on no product manager's roadmap to come up with this co-pilot solution, but we came up with it in a hackathon with engineers and like it's now a part of the core product. That's amazing, right? So I thought that that was just really, really cool and really goes to demonstrate that product management is so much more fluid, I think, than any sort of like really rigorous framework. It's not necessarily that like, a product manager gets to call all the shots, whatever, but it's more, how do we empower other people to come up with these ideas and then like sell this really amazing story around why it's going to create value.
Yeah, that's just an incredible story. Honestly, I was just wowed the entire time. So thank you so much. That's incredible that it was you just became part of the core functionality. I guess kind of stepping back into your role as a product manager though, what's something that you didn't really expect about product management when you first stepped into that that product manager role at your real estate company?
Yeah, great question. So I think what is it? So in terms of something that I didn't really expect, I think I didn't really run into this kind of early on in my career. I'm really running into it more now. And I think this goes all the way back to kind of that like me as an individual contributor versus me as like leading many other individual contributors and like moving them forward. I think one of the things I didn't really realize is that a product manager is really evaluated on their soft skills, right? And I think that that can be very hard to believe sometimes because it's, oh, but like I really need to like understand what engineers are talking about. I really need to understand like design and like data analytics and whatever. But at the end of the day, there are other people who are going to be far better than me at engineering. They're the engineers. There are people who will be far better than me at doing data analytics. It's the data analysts, right? Better salespeople than me, that's the salespeople. And so it's not how can I be the best in each of these different categories, but how can I make sure that I'm working with the best in each of these categories in a way where all of their efforts are aligned so that we have this synergistic value, this multiplicative exponential value, rather than everyone kind of doing their own thing in like a non-coordinated way, right? And so one of the things that can be very surprising is like product managers are in meetings all the time, sending emails all the time, slacking all the time, like trying to make all these communications happen. And it can feel really weird because like it's all of this kind of emotional work that you're pouring in terms of trying to keep all these people coordinated, motivated, filled with context, but also like not being thrashed back and forth between like competing priorities, right? It's all of this really emotional soft skill work that I definitely did not learn enough about as a student while I was at UC Berkeley, right? Because basically I was trying to get both of my majors across the finish line. Right? Like I was studying all the time in my UGPA classes and studying all the time for like, for like OChem and for like bio and whatever. And so I didn't actually focus on the soft skills. And I really wish I'd done more of that. And so this is going to be counterintuitive advice. But I would say, as you continue on your student journey, don't over-index on grades. Grades are important. Like, don't just like get rid of them or like completely ignore them, but go think about how you can actively cultivate your soft skills, right? Like not just hang out with friends, but how can I better understand what people are struggling with? How can I help them solve these pains? How can I influence people to do the things that I'd prefer for them to do? How can I get all these different people who are doing all these different things to align together, right? And so I think one of the things that might be very interesting is, we actually have a live case study right here, right now of we currently have Convergent and Product Space partnering together, right? And you both have different needs, you both have different objectives, initiatives, et cetera, but you wound up partnering together, right? Like I would love for you both of these organizations to think about how could we, partner together even deeper? How can we kind of continue to exercise our soft skills on each other so that we can drive even more value to move our own initiatives forward, but also to unlock all of this broader value in the world, right? And so I think, and you can't get that experience just by studying, right? Like, there's nothing that you could possibly study in a book to be able to unlock that. That's all experience, right? So, do not shy away from investing your time in different extracurricular activities, because those sometimes wind up paying off much more in kind of that longer run than just your grades, right? And again, that sounds really weird coming from like, a student who had like a 3.97 GPA from like the two hardest majors at Berkeley or whatever, right? Like I know that sounds really weird that like I'm the one who's saying like, don't worry about your grades, but like, honestly, my grades did not help me that much. Like I wish I had spent more time exercising my soft skills in college when I could have had a lot more time and a lot more harmless practice to do so, kind of rather than having to go fail like face first on the job. So definitely give that a consideration. Think about how could I do just a little bit more in terms of exercising my soft skills of understanding other people, influencing other people, coordinating with other people, rather than just kind of focusing on my coursework.
I think that's absolutely true, and I think we all take like grades a little too much for granted sometimes. So that's great. That's great advice to hear, honestly. And that actually, I guess, kind of segues into our final like curated question for tonight. In 30 seconds or less, or just like kind of really quick, could you give like your best piece of advice today for students to just walk away with?
Best piece of advice. I think the best piece of advice is to think about the world in terms of there are all of these pains that are out there, and I am the solution to one of these pains, right? And so I say that because, how do I phrase it? I think a lot of people, when they're trying to look for jobs or when they're trying to do a particular thing, they're like, I want to do whatever. I want to be a product manager. I want to be an engineer. I want to whatever. I want to earn all this money. I want to get into iBanking. I. And that's not how value is created in the world, right? The thing that we all have to remember is we have to first create value for other people before we can capture that value for ourselves, right? And so as an example, right? This is going to sound like a really weird example, right? But it's like, I have, these books that I published, right? And, I can very much tell all of you now, like, hey, if you're interested in product management, go read these books. And you're going to trust me because I created value for all of you on this call. I talked about all of my experiences, got into all of these steps, etc. But you would have never been open to me saying, by the way, I have these books that might be helpful to you and like you might want to purchase them or whatever, if you had not first gotten all of this value from me, right? And so like I could not possibly pitch you on reading one of my books unless I had first given you all of this value for free, right? And so one of the things that we have to remember is other people have pains and we need to find a way to go solve those pains. We need to create value for these people before we can capture that value. And so rather than trying to think of how can I be the perfect product manager candidate or how can I get the right set of skills or whatever, it's what is the pain that this organization has? Because if I can solve that pain, they will hire me, right? It's like, I think one of the things that people think about incorrectly in the interview process is, oh, I have to answer this question perfectly. I have to demonstrate that I have all these minimum requirements on the job description. And that's not how employers actually make job decisions. The way that they make decisions is, does this person solve the pain that I have? Because companies, to be real, companies don't really like creating jobs just for you to take, right? Like the point of a job is not for you to take it. The point of a job is a company cannot solve that pain with their current workforce and their current priorities. They can't. And so they need someone to jump in there and save them. And so they're looking for a solution to their pain. And you can't solve their pain until you know what their pain is. And so go on coffee chats, go talk to like other companies that understand what are they struggling with? What is their pain? Be a thought partner to them and understanding what their pain is and how you can solve their pain, and they will take you. That's just how it works, right? And so kind of, rather than coming from a perspective of fear of, oh no, like I'm a candidate, I'm competing against all these other people, it's there's all of this organic pain in the world, right? What is the pain that I care about solving? Let me demonstrate that I can solve that pain better than anyone else can solve that pain. And that company is going to take me no matter what, because I'm the best solution to the pain. I've gotten rid of the pain and they're going to take me, right? And so when you go in there as this confident thought partner, as a solution to their pain, they're going to try to grab you rather than you trying to grab them. Like they're going to be so excited to have you because you're going to finally solve that pain that they've been trying to hire a person to go solve. So that's the thing that I think is really, really important, regardless of what career path you want to go. If it's not product management, totally fine. But just remember, companies do not hire for you to take the job. They hire because they're suffering from pain. And so you need to understand what that pain is and demonstrate that you can solve it so that that is how they hire you.
Yeah, no, that totally makes a lot of sense. Yeah, no, thank you so much. And I guess, so now we're going to be moving into more of the audience questions, and I actually just got one. So please feel free to put any in the chat or like PM me or Angelica, any questions that you might have. So the first question we have here is, just kind of following up on one of your previous answers. How do you quantify how efficient you are, utilizing these soft skills that you kind of talk about? And what efforts did you and have you in the past kind of made to make these soft skills of yours, valuable?
Yeah, great question. So this is going to sound a little counterintuitive, but I actually think that there are some things that it's not necessarily worth quantifying. And so I think one of the things that we should keep in mind is reality kind of exists on its own. And when we create metrics, metrics are proxy to reality, right? And so we can say together that like, oh, like this particular Zoom call was X minutes long with these many participants and used up this much bandwidth, but that's not the reality of this call. They are all approximations of all of these different attributes of how we think we could measure this call, right? And so a metric can help you, like metrics are very valuable in understanding how much impact did I make along a particular axis, how much closer can I get to reality, but a metric does not have to be the end all be all, right? And so I think one of the things that is hard when working with other human beings is human beings are not predictable the way that like a computer is predictable or the way that like software code is predictable, right? Like human beings are very, they have their own personalities, they have their own unpredictabilities. And so I think a lot of understanding whether your soft skills are working or not is asking people, right? Like asking the people that you're trying to work with, right? Like, are these things that I'm doing actually working, right? Like, have I been able to clarify the things that you need to do? Have I demonstrated to you that like, these are the risks that we need to mitigate together? Like, are there things that I could be communicating to you better? Am I taking up too much of your time? Should I be taking more of your time? Are we not in touch enough? And so I think a lot of the time, getting a lot of that qualitative feedback around your soft skills is kind of actually a lot better. Getting the anecdotes of like, hey, Clement, when you did that presentation, right? Like, I thought that you said this thing really, really well and it really resonated. But when you said this other thing, that didn't really make sense. I was like, there's no way to quantify that because it's like, it's a piece of feedback. Someone gave me some piece of feedback that like I could rate from like 1 to 10 in terms of positivity, right? And I could break it down to all these subcomponents of like, oh, like effectiveness versus like structure versus whatever. But at the end of the day, the thing that I really need the most is I really need to understand from people directly, what was my impact on them and how do I need to fine tune that to make their lives better and make my life better, right? And so how can I really focus in on the way that I think about kind of improving my soft skills is more about being willing and courageous enough to hear that feedback from the people that I'm trying to leverage those soft skills on. And I think people are generally open to doing so because like you are trying to work together with them, you're taking their time, their attention, etc. And so they will have thoughts about you, right? Like they're just not necessarily eager to tell you because they're afraid that like you might react negatively. And so I think one of the things that's important is, thinking of feedback from other people as a gift and not as a curse or like as something that someone's trying to stab you with, right? Like feedback can be very constructive because that actually tells you the reality of how that person perceived what it is that you're doing with them and how you're working together with them, right? So I'd say, the thing that has helped me the most for making my soft skills more effective is in getting kind of real-time feedback from the people that I'm working with of, hey, Clement, this thing doesn't make a bunch of sense. Why didn't it make a bunch of sense? Like, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That is super helpful for me to figure out my soft skills rather than any sort of, regular check-in or like survey or like metric or analysis. Cause like those are not the things that actually demonstrate whether I have mastered my soft skills or not. And so, I can certainly come up with a hypothesis of like, oh, I think that I ramble too much, right? And so like, if I think I ramble too much and that's not good because it wastes all these people's attention, et cetera, then what I can do is I can give a presentation and then ask at the end, by the way, did people feel that I rambled too much, right? And like, if people say like, yes, and it's like, okay, what were the impacts of me rambling too much? And people might say, actually, it's really good that you rambled all of this because it makes it more human, it makes it more genuine. So I'm okay with you rambling. Great, then I'll keep rambling, right? But if people are saying, no, but this is really distracting and like I'm not getting to the main point, it's like, oh, that's why this doesn't work for you. And so when I'm presenting to you or when I'm presenting in this format or whatever, I should make sure that I'm not rambling because it has all these negative downstream consequences that I didn't think about before, right? So kind of it's all about what are the things that I think I should be changing in myself? Why do I think I should be doing that? And then asking other people, did this change that I made actually help you? How did you perceive that? Should I continue doing that? Should I be changing myself in a different way to basically help them be able to reach their higher heights, right? I think a lot of it is, how can I work in service of empowering other people? And by doing so, empower myself. Right? So kind of, that's how I think about soft skills, which again, was a rambling answer. Feel free to give me feedback over LinkedIn in terms of whether that answer was way too rambly, because I'd love to hear that. But yeah, that's how I think about soft skills.
All right, no, that sounds amazing, and I think that's a really clear breakdown of how people should be thinking about qualitative feedback and everything like that. So thank you so much, and thanks to the audience member who asked that. We'd love to get any other questions. Feel free to just raise your hand, or PM one of us or PM Clement, however you want to ask your question. We do have a couple more minutes remaining, so if you want to, this is kind of your time.
I actually have a question.
Sure.
Where do you see your career going in the next couple of years, and how has your experience as a PM been impacted by COVID?
Those are solid questions. Nice. So the first question is, how do I see my career as a product manager? And how do I think about that evolving? I think, again, this kind of goes all the way back to what is it that I want to do with myself? And I think the thing that I really want to do is I want to be able to unlock as much depth and breadth of positive impact in the world as I can. And I think as of right now, product management seems to be very uniquely positioned to do things like that, because you are able to make all of these positive transformations at scale, where you get to do these things. You get to make your teammates, a lot more empowered in terms of, how do they do their work and being able to drive a real impact. You get to make your customers a lot more profitable, and kind of you get to solve their really real pains, the things that really keep them up at night. And then you get to solve their customers' pains, right? Like, because they are trying to serve other people. And so you can make all of these other people's lives better. And on top of that, there's so many people who want to be product managers that, like, I think one of the things that I get to do is that, I get to share my experiences and, help pave the way for other people to take a similar path. And so then that means that I get to unlock all these other people being able to also make their company better and make their customers better and make kind of their customers better, right? Like, and so kind of you see this like really, really amazing ripple effect that, product management seems to have uniquely right now. I don't think that I'm necessarily going to be a product manager for the rest of my life, because the thing is, new jobs are invented all of the time. And so if there are roles where I get to unlock even deeper positive impact with even broader scale, I'm certainly going to consider that, right? But like, maybe that's a different role. Maybe that's a different industry. Maybe that's a different company. I don't know. And I am okay with that, because I think one of the things that you learn as a product manager is you can have all these plans, but the thing is, because there are all of these different factors that are always coming at you, you need to always be reacting to it, and you need to always be updating your plans in real time. And so I think, kind of because of being a product manager, I've stopped worrying about like, this is my 3-year career plan and this is my 10-year career plan. It's more about, I'm going to grow as many of the skills that I think are valuable as I can, that I know that other people find valuable. I'm going to try to really understand the pain that other people have. I'm going to go after those pains, and that's what I'm going to go do. So kind of that is how I think about my career. It's not necessarily like, here are the concrete things that I'm specifically going to be doing, but more so in general, here are my principles, and here are the things that I want to go do and how I want to improve myself, and kind of going down whatever path that might be kind of as it comes up. So it's kind of a more fluid approach to career management, which is not necessarily for everyone. So there's that. In terms of the COVID question, that's actually a really good question. I think in the past, it really mattered, where you put yourself physically and kind of who surrounded you physically and how you work with other people in person, like in real time in space, right? And that is very much not true anymore. With remote working being, being now kind of the default standard, right? Like when we snap out of COVID, and everyone's vaccinated and everyone's safe and there's no more pandemic, there will still be many companies who will continue to work remotely because they've already been able to prove that like it actually works. Like we did not go out of business, we didn't go bankrupt, we were able to continue running our business forward, et cetera, right? And so because of that, we'll see that there are so many more roles that will become remote. And I think the thing about remote roles is that you need to be so much more intentional with your soft skills. You need to be so much more intentional with how you present and how you communicate and who you ping and when you ping them, et cetera, in a way that you didn't necessarily have to do when you were in person. Because in person, you kind of could rely on your natural interactions with other people. You can rely on bumping into other people and then being like, oh, by the way, I forgot this thing, et cetera, et cetera. You don't get to forget anymore. Like you have to be really, really intentional with all of the ways that you're working with remote colleagues. And so I think, kind of no matter what role you're going to be working in, there is a high likelihood that you'll be interfacing with remote colleagues, or that someone that you're working with is working with remote colleagues. And that means that we're going to have to be even stronger at our soft skills, not our hard skills, right? And so again, kind of one of the benefits of being a student is that you're surrounded by all these other students, right? And so I would highly advise people start learning how to do jump into like virtual networking things, because you don't get to network in person anymore. And you're likely going to want to continue virtually networking because everyone's going to be used to doing that, right? And so, I think remote is here to stay, and kind of no matter how much we snap back to kind of the pre-pandemic times, there will always still be this like much more validated defaulted space of everyone thinks remotely or whatever. And so kind of it's important for us to kind of lean into that instead of shying away from it. And that's something that we will definitely want to keep in mind as we grow our careers and as we think about how we want to make a professional impact in the world.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Seeing as it is 7:02, we will be wrapping it up. Just want to say a big thank you to Clement for being here. If you have any other questions, feel free to send them to me or Atharva, or connect directly with Clement on LinkedIn. His LinkedIn is in the chat. I'm sure he would be happy to answer any of your questions. He has been a delightful guest today. And thank you so much for being here, everyone. I hope you have a very relaxing weekend. Happy President's Day. And thank you so much.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, everyone.